Can anyone in the AFC West contend with the Kansas City Chiefs in 2023? What's going on, BLV? It's Mitch here to preview each team in the AFC West, give you my record prediction, my prediction for your favorite team's season this NFL season. The Raiders, the Chargers, the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Denver Broncos, breaking down their depth charts, their rosters, their strengths, their weaknesses, the surprises, and the disappointments that are about to happen in 2023 within the AFC West. Will there just be one team making the playoffs? Will there be two? Will there be three? How will this division shape up? That's what I'm going to break down in this video. So if that sounds good, don't forget to Gronk spike the like button. And let's talk some AFC West, man. Because the AFC West, last season, you might have remembered this. This division was expected to be like the greatest division of all time. Do you remember that? Like everyone's like, oh, the greatest division. And even I kind of fell for it. I'm not going to lie. I liked the Raiders getting Josh McDaniels with what they did the year previous and having an awesome offense. Devontae Adams, Chandler Jones, so much noise. And that was awesome. The Chargers bringing in Khalil Mack, bringing in J.C. Jackson. The Denver Broncos trading for Russell Wilson. There was so much noise and so much passion and so much hype. And then what happens? Well, the Kansas City Chiefs, they easily win the division. The Chargers actually end up being pretty good. They make the playoffs. And it was pretty much just exactly what has happened over the past, 5 to 7 years since Patrick Mahomes has come into the NFL. So it was a big disappointment last year. Maybe this is the post-hype sleeper division in the NFL. Maybe the AFC West will rise to be the best division in football this season. It's entirely possible. There's talent on these teams. There's good coaching in this division. There's good offenses, good defenses, awesome quarterback play. So let's begin with the team that has won it seemingly every year for the past, 6 or 7, it feels like. The Kansas City Chiefs, your Super Bowl champs, going first. The expectations for the Kansas City Chiefs, of course, are Super Bowl or bust. The Chiefs have entered the category of wannabe dynasty in terms of they want to be a dynasty. They want to confirm it. We've heard it from Travis Kelce. We've heard it from Patrick Mahomes. They believe they need to win 3 to be a dynasty. And I agree with them. You have to win 3 out of 4, in my opinion, to be a dynasty in the NFL. But hey, 3 Super Bowl rings, and no matter how long that run is, I still think that's probably a dynasty. So the Kansas City Chiefs want to be a dynasty, and they can do that if they win this year. They really can do that. So there's a lot of pressure within their team, and I'm sure it's coming from within, but it also comes from the fan base. This is a team, this is a franchise that expects Super Bowl or bust, right? And they didn't really make a lot of changes this offseason. They really didn't go out and make any flashy signings. They didn't go out and make any massive trades. They kind of tried to stay put with what they had last year. And it was good enough to win last year, but will it be good enough to win this year? Typically, when a team tries to stay the same, it doesn't work out. It's very rare that it works out for a football team and they actually get better or they're able to stay the same. Now, the core is here. The fundamentals of Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Chris Jones, hopefully, will be there for week 1. Those guys are here, and they're here to stay, along with a couple big names on the offensive line. Creed Humphrey, Joe Thuney. The fundamental aspects of this team are there, and that's what will make this team a probable lock to make the playoffs. The question is, have teams in the AFC surpass them? So let's take a look at the strengths, the weaknesses, and the overall breakdown of the Chiefs entering 2023. So the Kansas City Chiefs at quarterback, of course, have the best guy in the game. He is the king right now. He is the Tom Brady of this era. That is Patrick Mahomes right now. Number 1 quarterback in the game, undisputed. And I felt like he put an absolute clinched lock on that position after his epic season last year, where he was able to not only win the NFL MVP, but a Super Bowl MVP and the Super Bowl, which is just very hard to do. I don't remember the last time that actually happened. Coaching rank, number 2 for me for Andy Reid. If you want to say number 1, that's perfectly fine. Personally, I do have Kyle Shanahan ahead of him, and I had to somewhat balance, okay, I think Mahomes is this generational player, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. I love Andy Reid, and I think he is one of the greatest coaches of all time, but I feel like his status right now as a coach is definitely helped by the fact that he has Patrick Mahomes. So that's my real argument where Kyle Shanahan is taking Brock Purdy to the NFC Championship. So that's a side note, but number 2, number 1, regardless, he's a top 2 coach in the NFL. Offensive line, I think, is probably the area that most casual fans don't really discuss about the Chiefs. I think most NFL fans and Chiefs fans recognize how good this offensive line is, especially last year. I felt they were dominant. They were the reason, in my opinion, on top of Mahomes' superb play. But if you go back and watch a lot of the big games the Chiefs played, I mean, Mahomes had all day to throw, including the Super Bowl. And that really helps because Mahomes is a guy that wants to be creative. He wants to be able to extend plays with his magical arm strength and his poise. And without a good offensive line, you're not able to do that. If you're constantly under duress, it speeds up your process and you're not able to be the magical Mahomes. And we saw that a couple years back, right? And he wasn't as great. So the offensive line, I think, has probably the best interior in football. The question will be the tackle position, which we'll get to in a little bit. More depth coming up here when we look at the depth charts. The offensive rank, I have number 2 behind Philadelphia. I give the respect to the Chiefs that they deserve. They were the best offense in football last year, I would say. I usually don't just look at offensive rankings based on the statistical data or data, depending on how you say that word. I typically look at it based on how they produce in big games, how they're able to stay balanced. Can they win through their running game, their passing game? Can they beat you down the field, underneath, screen game? The more layers they can beat you with. And I feel like going into this year, the Chiefs have less answers at wide receiver. There's a certain question mark at that position. I just don't think that the Eagles have any question marks about their offense, and they can beat you in any way, shape, or form. Jalen Hurts running their running game with the running backs. The offensive line is phenomenal. Jalen Hurts throwing the ball to Smith and A.J. Brown and all that stuff. But overall, the Chiefs are incredible. They've got the best quarterback, one of the best play callers, a really good offensive line, Travis Kelce. Those are the core principles of a very good offense in this league. Looking at the roster, I rated it 10th. I don't think they're the best roster in the NFL, but they happen to be the best team last year. There's a difference between roster talent and team, and I feel like they have a lot of young players that could be ascending this year and potentially move that roster rank up. They could also have some regression from potentially like Travis Kelce, a guy that's getting a little bit older, but we'll see how that goes. Secondary rank, I think, is a little underrated in the secondary. They did lose one of their key pieces in Juan Thornhill this offseason, but they replaced him with Mike Edwards, who isn't a bad player, and I feel like some of those young corners. L'Jarius Sneed's one of my favorites in football. I think he's super underrated, but you look at McDuffie, who could have a big rise this year. Watson is another one. Cook is another one at safety. And Justin Reed's a very solid player. So I feel like the secondary is underrated. Maybe the strength of the defense. The defensive line isn't a slouch whatsoever. I feel like Chris Jones is a dominant force out there. And then you have George Karlaftis in his second year could take a jump. They did draft a first-round defensive end who is probably going to be in the rotation. I think Mike Dana, I believe is how you say his name. I used to say it as Dana. Is a pretty good player too, as like a sub-package player where you can put him inside and he can rush the passer. And then they did lose Frank Clark, which I guess is a little bit of a loss. The defense rank, I think, will be top 20 this year. I could even see a top 15 unit this season, maybe a top 12 unit if everything goes right with their younger players. But last year, they were kind of up and down all season as expected. Moving on to the depth chart of the Kansas City Chiefs. Offensively, they have a lot of things that you like. Of course, Mahomes, like I said, that interior offensive line gives them a very high floor with their running game and their passing game. And I feel like the underrated aspect of their Super Bowl run last year was Pacheco and the ability to run the ball when they needed to run the ball. I feel like against Philadelphia, if they were not able to run the ball like they did last year, I don't think they win that game. They just, Mahomes, people forget, he didn't even have 200 yards in that Super Bowl game. And Pacheco and McKinnon and those guys were really running the ball and doing a great job. And that offensive line was moving the Eagles' defensive line in that Super Bowl. I think that could be a big part of this offense this year to keep them balanced. And Andy Reid is sometimes reluctant to run the ball, but I think he'll stay balanced, especially with the receiving core that does have question marks right now. There's only 3 names I put on the depth chart, but you could add 6 or 7 to this depth chart. That's how many players might rotate into this rotation here. You've got Kadarius Toney, who, in my opinion, bringing this graphic down for a second, Kadarius Toney, to me, can be one of the best, most talented receivers in football. He really has that rare of a skill set. When you watch Kadarius Toney, I've been a big fan of him as a talent over the last couple of years, including his Giants days, entering the draft. He has such rare lateral quickness, stop-start ability, that if he can stay healthy, if he can really just hone in on football and just be all in with Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes in this offense, this guy could be a unique talent. This guy could put up huge numbers. I think he could be a 100-catch receiver. He is that type of special, in my opinion. Just rare quickness. And he makes people miss at an elite rate. Now, there's other guys that Toney's already banged up. He is uncertain entering week 1, which is a huge concern for me because you lost a security blanket in Juju Smith-Schuster, who ended up signing with my Patriots. I just felt like Juju was always the guy that Mahomes would go to when teams were doubling Kelsey or paying extra attention to Kelsey. Juju would always be the guy to come up with that big play. And I'm not sure who that's going to be this year. Is it Toney? He's a little unreliable, right? As we discussed, but super talented. Marquise Valdes-Scantling is kind of a one-trick pony. We know this. He lines up on the outside, he runs vertical routes, and he'll stretch the defense, and he'll allow the Chiefs to still have that vertical element that a Tyreek Hill brought to the table, but he's not going to be nearly as productive, right? But he's not an underneath or intermediate threat. He has a couple of games every year where he goes off, but it's not going to be consistent. And then Sky Moore is really the guy you would hope makes a huge leap because he was a second-round pick last year. I was actually a big fan of Sky Moore. He reminded me a little bit of like one of those inside slot receivers who could also line up on the outside because of his vertical ability. And I think he had it in college. I didn't see anything last year, and I have yet to see anything in the NFL to let me know that he can be a real receiver in this league. So I'm still waiting, but I certainly was a fan of him coming into the NFL. We'll see if it's his time to shine this year. They also have guys like Justin Ross, who's competing for a spot on the roster right now. They've got Watson, the Buck, who went to the Chiefs last year and shocked a lot of people with numerous big plays throughout the year, kind of sprinkles in every once in a while, a good run blocker, a good role player. Richie James, a veteran slot receiver who's a decent player. He knows what he's doing, and he can definitely produce if Toney isn't out there, I would say. He's kind of like a Toney replacement, I would say. If Toney's hurt, then maybe that guy takes the role, Richie James. And I'm probably missing another guy as well. But overall, the Chiefs, or Rashee Rice, I think it is, the rookie. Bigger body guy that also can line up on the outside. The Chiefs offense, though, it's going to come down to, can they figure out that wide receiver position? We know what Kelsey's going to bring despite his age. We know what McKinnon is going to bring in the passing game as a running back. Pacheco, I think, is going to have a nice season. Mahomes is Mahomes. The interior offensive line is great. The tackles and the receiving core are the question marks, which is why I didn't rank them at number 1 as an offense. Donovan Smith was putrid last year, guys. Putrid. I mean, he was terrible. I'm a guy that watched every Bucs fan for the Bucs game for the last 3 years. I was a Bucs fan when Brady was there. Donovan Smith was horrendous last season, so they need to get a lot more out of him. I will say this scheme is a lot better than what he had in Tampa Bay, and the coaching is much better, and he's also motivated. So those are 3 things that bring to the table. Donovan Smith's been a good player in his past. The question is he now kind of declining? Is he too old? Is he just done? That's the question. But we'll see. You know, sometimes with the Chiefs, they just figure it out, and these guys all of a sudden are reclamation projects, a little bit like Juju, and they turn it around after one bad year. Right tackle, Jawan Taylor. comes from Jacksonville, big replacement. They put big money into him. He's a great pass blocker, has issues with run blocking, but has a huge upside as a pass blocker to protect Patrick Mahomes. That's the side that usually Mahomes is scrambling to, although he does scramble to the left as well and throw across his body. We've seen that as well. But Juwan Taylor kind of got the money that Orlando Brown might have gotten, and he left to Cincinnati. And I think Taylor's maybe a better athlete than Brown, but maybe less of a consistent player, I would say. Like, Orlando Brown's a really good anchor in the pass game, and I know that Chiefs fans had issues with his consistency at times, but I like Orlando Brown. I think he's been good for you guys. But overall, it's going to be an interesting unit on offense. Taking a look at the defense, I feel like the defense is a lot more kind of boom or bust. I definitely feel like if this team's going to repeat as Super Bowl champions, the defense is going to have to take a step forward. Because as I mentioned, there's lots of questions with the offense, as good as it can be and as good as it probably will be. If they are not like elite, I don't think the offense is going to be able to carry this team to a Super Bowl. So I think the defense has to step their game up. They certainly have the players here to get better. I mean, you look at a lot of young names here. Karlaftis is one of them. McDuffie is another. Watson is another. Cook is another. We kind of know what the linebackers are at this point. We know what Chris Jones is, the best defensive lineman in football. Bolton is a really good linebacker. I would say he's a top 15 linebacker in football. I think Justin Reed, a second year in Spagnuolo's defense, might ascend as well. I think L'Jarius Sneed, really good player, plays a lot in the nickel position. For whatever reason, our lads had McDuffie there. Maybe they want to put McDuffie there. But Sneed can play in either position, so I'm not really concerned regardless. Watson is primarily only an outside perimeter corner. And then, we'll see what the edge rotation is like. That, I guess, is a question mark, because this is the first year in a while without Frank Clark, although Frank Clark was kind of declining in the end there with Kansas City. And then, like I mentioned, Mike Edwards, I think, will replace Juan Thornhill as that deep safety when they go to 3 safety looks. So what I like about the Chiefs defense, they're well schemed. I think they bring a lot schematically to the table. I think they're tough. When they want to stop the run, they're good at stopping it. We saw that in the Super Bowl. They can blitz from all angles. I think they have enough cornerback talent, and they're diverse enough in coverage to play man or zone. I think their linebackers are pretty good. Drew Tranquil is another guy I forgot to mention. They also signed him as an extra layer of depth. He could maybe play some snaps as a cover player as well if they want to add an extra linebacker to it. And then Leo Chanel is another guy that I liked coming out 2 years ago. He actually played a pretty big role in the Super Bowl. And can Karlaftis take a step forward? Because I think the big thing with this defense, they need that second pass rusher. They need that second guy. Outside of Chris Jones, they need someone to step up and have like an 8-sack season. If they can get that out of Karlaftis, then that could really help this defense. But overall, I see it as a bit of an average defense that has upside due to the young players. And I wouldn't be surprised if, like every season with Spagnuolo's defense, it just keeps getting better as the season goes. Maybe it starts off a little rough, and then it keeps getting better and keeps getting better. They kind of figure out what they're good at, and then they kind of shift towards more of that. And that's typically how it works. So for the Kansas City Chiefs this year, my record prediction for them is 12-5. I have them winning the AFC West without question. No debate, no thought behind that whatsoever. I don't have any really questions that they'll not win this division. I think 12-5, a year after winning the Super Bowl, of course, they have those targets on their back. The Chiefs are played tough and hard and physical every week because teams want to beat them. So 12-5 seems about right. It's a really difficult AFC. It's a pretty tough schedule. They play all the top teams in the AFC. They have to play, I think, probably a better AFC West this year. I think they might drop 1 or 2 games in the division. And overall, 12-5, I could see 13-4. I could see them going as good as 15-2. And my floor for them is the highest in the NFL, which is 10-7 and still making the playoffs as long as Mahomes is healthy for a majority of the season. That's considering his health. But I feel like the floor is basically the defense disappoints, they decline, the offense can't find good tackles and good receivers, and it's basically like the Mahomes show, the Kelsey show. They're too one-dimensional on offense, and the defense just isn't good enough, and they're basically only winning because of Mahomes and Andy Reid and Travis Kelsey, but that's their floor. Their ceiling is their defense gets better, Kadarius Toney turns into a stud, and this team is just extremely dangerous. Donovan Smith figures it out. They could be better than last year during the regular season. I wouldn't be surprised. But the question for the Chiefs is always, what will they do in the playoffs? And I'm not going to give that away right now, but I will say, going to be difficult to really repeat as Super Bowl champions. We haven't seen that happen since 03-04, but if there's any team that can do it with the consistency that the Chiefs have, they pretty much have become a lock for the AFC Championship game in recent years. So, hey man, if they can get back to the AFC Championship game, all it takes is 2 wins from there to be a repeat of Super Bowl champions. That being said, there's so many good teams in the AFC, and if they face injury issues, if they have a little bit of an unluckier time in the playoffs, things just happen. It's really hard to win in the NFL. So Kansas City Chiefs, I have going 12-5, winning the division once again in 2023. We'll see what happens in the playoffs. The next team, I want to talk about the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders are next up in my AFC West preview. The expectations for the Raiders are pretty low. After a season that was a disappointment for the Vegas Raiders, people thought that with Derek Carr getting an offensive mind like Josh McDaniels and Devontae Adams, his best buddy, coming to town, with Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow and Josh Jacobs, they would light up the skies, they would dominate offensively, and defensively with Max Crosby and Chandler Jones, you could only improve from the year previous. Now, what ended up happening was Derek Carr and Josh McDaniels didn't exactly see eye to eye. Derek Carr declined mightily from the year before, where he was one of the low-key MVPs of the 2021 NFL season. And despite having an awesome running game where Josh Jacobs led the NFL in rushing, like point blank period, which is crazy to think of. Like this time last year, if you would have told me Josh Jacobs leads the NFL in rushing, I would have been a little surprised, but I also would have said, well, the Raiders must have been an awesome team. Like you don't lead the NFL in rushing and then you suck, right? Well, that's what ended up happening. Their defense might have been the worst in the NFL last season, and they lost so many games in the fourth quarter. They lost so many leads, and Derek Carr was not able to bring that fourth quarter performance from 2021 and transfer it to the 2022 NFL season. And that's really what derailed this football team. This year, their expectations, like I said, are very low because they didn't perform well last year. People are very down on Josh McDaniels. People don't really trust Jimmy Garoppolo to stay healthy or do anything special, and they think he's basically a Kyle Shanahan product, and they know the defense isn't very good. They also look at the Chiefs and Chargers and even Sean Payton and the Broncos now with Russell Wilson and expect the Raiders to finish last in this division. And honestly, I don't think that is crazy. Like, I feel like you should be down on the Raiders. You should be. Like, this team did not do well enough last year, and they still have a lot of questions on their roster. That being said, if this team gets a little bit luckier and they get more consistent quarterback play, this team could make the playoffs. I honestly believe that. Like, their offense could be absolutely spectacular this season. So let's take a look at where the Raiders rank across the board in the NFL, offensively, defensively, and in different units to get a sense for what I believe the Raiders are this year. So, at quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo ranks number 20 for me. I thought about ranking him, anywhere from like 17 through 20. I think 20 was a little bit on the low side. One thing you have to consider about Jimmy Garoppolo is he has played in the best system in the NFL with the best play caller in the NFL, really ever since he's become successful in San Francisco with Kyle Shanahan. Secondly, he is a guy that doesn't really bring a lot to the table. He is very one-dimensional. He is a short and intermediate quick passer with a quick release and good pocket presence and a lot of toughness. He is a great leader and a great kind of charismatic quarterback and presence. Players love him, I think, way more than Derek Carr. Like, I've seen just something about Jimmy where he has that presence to him where players really want to fight and play for him. We saw that in San Francisco. There's a reason this guy is a winner at the rate that he is, because He's just a guy's guy, and I think Jimmy is really tough in that way. I will also say that in the system that fits him, he can be highly productive, as we saw in San Francisco. But at the same time, he is not a vertical passer. He's not an outside the numbers passer. He does not run. He is not a very dynamic athlete or dynamic talent, but the guy can get the job done at his best. Coaching rank, Josh McDaniels, I have probably higher than a lot of other people. I'm a little biased. I'm a Pats fan, and I've seen the best of Josh McDaniels. I'm a big Josh McDaniels fan, a big Josh McDaniels believer when it comes to his offensive scheme and his that's what I know. That is what I know as a football fan of offensive football, is growing up and watching the Patriots offense, and Josh McDaniels has been the biggest influence. Don't get it wrong, don't get it twisted. Their scheme has come from Josh McDaniels over the years. It wasn't Tom Brady, it wasn't Bill Belichick, it wasn't Bill O'Brien. It was Josh McDaniels over the years, and and the thing has been with Josh McDaniels is, yeah, he has kind of lacked the same expert success without Tom Brady. You could say the same thing about Bill Belichick, but that being said, we've seen him have success with Mac Jones. We've seen him have success in certain regards in Denver and in New England with Cam Newton, and we've seen him have some spectacular moments. Can he piece it together here with a guy that knows his system? I felt like last year there was just a disconnect between him and Derek Carr. Derek Carr did not grow up in that system. He's been in a West Coast system his whole career. Jimmy Garoppolo grew up in the New England system. And even though he's taken a little bit of a departure to the San Francisco West Coast style and wide zone style, I feel like Jimmy is going to be a lot more comfortable. And I think that's going to make everyone else more comfortable, especially the guys that are in their second year. The entire offensive line's in their second year. You know, you've got Josh Jacobs in his second year, Devontae Adams in his second year, Hunter Renfrow in his second year. They signed Jacoby Myers, who's been in the system his whole career. So I think McDaniels has a lot more to work with from a coaching standpoint, a scheme standpoint. I believe in him this year from that standpoint. Offensive line, I think, is really underrated. I think they have one of the most underrated offensive lines in football. I think this offensive line was really good last year. I mean, you don't lead the NFL in rushing and have a bad offensive line. So everyone that talks down the Raiders' offensive line, I think they're a bunch of idiots. I think they're a bunch of fools. I don't think they know what they're talking about. The tackle duo between Miller and Illuminor is probably the most underrated duo in football. And the interior, yeah, can suffer in pass protection at times, but I think James is a solid center, and I think there's some of these guys that are really growing, like the young guy Parham, I believe is how you properly pronounce his name, but let me know there. He's a guy that I thought showed flashes last year, and they have decent depth on the offensive line as well. That's one area that stuck out to me and stood out to me, you know, watching their growth in free agency this offseason was the added depth on defense, the added depth on offense. I think they did a good job in the offseason of building the depth at certain positions. I think offensive line was one of them, but the offensive rank I have at 14. I could certainly see that being better. I couldn't see it being much worse than a top half offense. They have too much talent, too much creativity, and I think they're a very balanced offense. The one thing I would consider about the offense is I feel like they're going to be a little bit lacking explosiveness in the passing game as with Jimmy at quarterback, because I just don't know if he's much of a downfield passer, which I think certain teams and defenses will take advantage of. But I also think they're going to be so good at running the ball. Their screen game is so good. And then they have Hunter Renfrow, Jacoby Myers, and Devontae Adams. I don't think there's a better trio at separating and getting open underneath the defense than those three guys. The roster rank overall ranked 27th, largely due to the defense, which we'll discuss. Secondary is still a big, huge question mark at number 29. Defensive line, I think, has a lot of upside at number 22, though. Chandler Jones could play better this year. He did not play well last year. Max Crosby is an animal. Love that guy. And then they brought in Tyree Wilson from the draft, who I was a big fan of. He was my number one defensive line prospect, other than Jalen Carter. So the defensive rank at number 30, which, again, I just don't know if they answered enough questions on that side of the football. But let's start off positive with the depth chart. On the offensive side of the football, we got Jacoby Myers, Devontae Adams, Hunter Renfrow at wide receiver. They've got a lot more depth than that, but those are the three primary guys that will see the most snaps. The interesting thing about Myers and Renfrow, they're both kind of known as slot receivers, but this reminds me, for Raiders fans out there, to get a good feel for this unit. It reminds me of when Edelman and Amendola were both on New England. So if you want a good reference point for how Myers and Renfrow will be utilized in this offense, I feel like it will be like that. Obviously, New England didn't have a Devontae Adams, but they did have a Rob Gronkowski. So I feel like it's slightly different, but it's sort of the same. So if you're looking for a reference point, look for Edelman and Amendola tape. I think Renfrow is the Amendola. I think Myers will play more of the all-over, outside, inside, kind of more of the Z receiver type of role, which Edelman kind of played in New England. So just to give Raiders fans a heads up, Devontae Adams is that X factor, is that alpha, is the guy demanding attention from defenses. Austin Hooper, a very reliable tight end. I think he's an underrated football player. Better in real life than a fantasy guy, but man, he can block, he can catch, he can move the chains. And then they drafted a second-round rookie who has a very promising ceiling in Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame, a guy that I wouldn't be surprised if he was the starting tight end by the end of the year. Absolutely. So the offensive line I've already talked about, I think is a lot stronger than people give it credit for. They've got good running backs, Jacobs, White. I still believe they have Abdullah, who also is a returner. Brandon Bolden is still on this team as a core special teamer. They'll factor in as well. But I like what I've seen from Zamir White this preseason, and Josh Jacobs is one of the best running backs in football. Jimmy Garoppolo is the quarterback. And I will also say another promising thing about the preseason is watching O'Connell play and understanding that if Jimmy were to go down, I think they have a rookie quarterback that can come in and at least play fine. At least operate the offense, which is something I wasn't sure about after they lost Jarrett Stidham, who I thought Jarrett Stidham played well for you guys last year too. So the offense, I think this is low-key one of the best in the NFL, or at least has that potential. Moving to the defensive side of football is where they have all the questions. And I would say this about the Raiders. If the Raiders were in the NFC, let's say if the Raiders were in the NFC South, I would pick the Raiders to win that division. That's what I believe of the Raiders. If the Raiders were in the NFC West, let's say that you swap them out for the Seahawks, I'd pick them to finish second. If you put the Raiders in the NFC North, I would probably pick them to be a wild card team. That is what I believe of the Raiders. But it just so happens that they're in the AFC. And when you have a unit that looks like this on paper, I can't trust you to make the playoffs. Now, do I think you have upside with a lot of young players that could surprise that we don't really know? They're unknown, so who knows, right? Like Bennett. I don't know where he came from. He's a 4th-round pick. Maybe he's good, maybe he stinks. But hey, Marcus Peters, we've seen before. He's a veteran. The guy can ball at times, but he is definitely a declining player. Nate Hobbs has been an elite player in his rookie season. Last year had a little bit of a rough time trying to be that number 1 outside corner. They're going to move him back to his comfortable nickel position. I think that will help him. Crosby and Jones can be a dominant duo when they want to be, and Tyree Wilson, I think, is the type of guy that will spell Chandler Jones and make Chandler Jones a better player at this age because he'll play less snaps. They need more production from the interior. Tillery and Nichols, definitely Nichols. Tillery flashes at times. He does have unique athleticism. They need more out of linebacker. Last year, Denzel Perryman played pretty well, but he wasn't a great fit for the system. Diablo, he's a good athlete. Spillane, not as much, but he's a tough, smart football player. Epps is another tough, smart football player that's reliable. They need more out of Morig this season. I would say that this Raiders defense can't be worse than it was last year. It has more depth, I think, at pretty much every level of the defense, and I think they'll be more comfortable in the system than they were last year. They have to be. They were pathetic last season. There's no doubt about it. And it was basically a one-man defense in Max Crosby last year. It was actually crazy to watch this defense play because it was just Max Crosby making every play imaginable and the rest of the defense getting burnt like toast. So overall, I think the Raiders are a fun team. I think they're a team that I have a wide variety of outcomes for. And like I said, if they were in a different division in the other conference, I think they're a lot better than they get credit for. But because they're in the division they are, in the conference they are, they have such a big weakness on defense and such big question marks. I can't pick them to be a good team. So my overall record prediction is 7-10. I think there's going to be a lot of people that are lower than 7-10 out there. I think my ceiling is 10-7. The defense gets closer to, a top 20 unit, and they're not so terrible. and the offense is a top 10 unit, and Jimmy plays really well. And I could see that happening at 10-7, and they finish as the second best team in the AFC West. Their record I have at 7-10. Their floor is 4-13. The reason I have it so low is if Jimmy gets injured, which is entirely possible. So I have to factor that in. Jimmy getting injured for a good portion of the season, the defense being putrid, and obviously a rookie quarterback that was drafted late in the draft, not being able to make up for that gap between their defense and the rest of the NFL. So I have them slightly going over, though. So I have a little bit more faith in the Raiders than a lot of people. I know that this is one of the most heavily bet unders in the NFL. And I just think the Raiders are a little bit of a post-hype sleeper in some regards. Like, I feel like a lot of people were hyping them up last year, and it was the wrong time to hype them up. This year, I feel like they're not as bad as everyone's saying. They're not as good as everyone thought they would be last year. They're somewhere in the middle, and that's kind of how I feel about the Raiders this year. But I wouldn't be surprised if Jimmy Garoppolo and McDaniels click. They have really good receiving talent. They have a really awesome offense. They're going to be tough to stop, and they're going to be able to hang in a lot of games because of the offense. So look out for the Raiders. They're going to be a must-watch team this season. The next team I want to discuss is the Los Angeles Chargers. Chargers are back for another season in 2023, and their expectations, I would say, are about the same as last year, maybe actually a little less, which is kind of funny to say, because last year the Chargers were one of these teams that, like usual with the Chargers, hyped to the absolute moon. You might say Mars last season. I mean, I had them winning the division last year. Like, that's how much talent this team had on paper. That's how much promise this team really had. Compared to a Chiefs team that had a lot of turnover, a lot of young players. You know, the Chiefs kind of had a lot of question marks on offense. They got rid of Tyreek Hill. There was a lot of questions about the Chiefs last year. The Chargers, you know, they added all these big names. J.C. Jackson. They added, who never really played. They added Khalil Mack. They have Keenan Allen, they have Mike Williams, they have Rashawn Slater, they have Austin Eckler, they have Justin Herbert. Staley was coming off, you know, a decent season, and people were still kind of believing in him. And then everyone thought the defense would be better. So the Chargers are fun because I could see them actually living up to what people thought they would be last year. But at the same time, like, I just don't know if I can let myself get there this year with them. Like, I'm at the point with the Chargers where I just want to see it before I believe it. Like, I need to see it because they always run into injury issues. The coaching has been a little suspect over the last couple of years. Offensively, Kellen Moore should help Justin Herbert, which is, if you're buying into the narrative that they're going to live up to the hype this year, that is got to be one of the top points. Now, Kellen Moore, I think, is a little overrated. There's a reason he was fired by the Dallas Cowboys. Like, a lot of people are hyping him to Mars, but he's good. He's better than Lombardi, okay? But he's not like Kyle Shanahan, okay? So don't go crazy here. But the Los Angeles Chargers have talent on defense, talent on offense. Can they make the playoffs? Absolutely. Can they be a dark horse to get to the Super Bowl in the AFC? If everything goes right, they can. They have that type of talent. So let's take a look at where they rank across the board this season. So at number 6 is Justin Herbert at quarterback. I believe Justin Herbert is an elite level quarterback when he's at his best. Now, the only reason I have him a little bit outside the elite, I'd put him in like the very good category. He hasn't shown that playoff winning success. I need to see that before I can put him in that category. And that's just me, you know? Like, I understand the talent. He's got a rocket for an arm. He can make every throw. And from a pocket standpoint, he might be the most surgical, mechanical quarterback in the NFL. If you're talking about a guy that can be like a Tom Brady level surgeon in the pocket, it's Justin Herbert. He's smart. He can make all the throws. He has a powerful arm. He can throw the ball deep. He can pick up a defense apart underneath. He can, in the 2-minute situation, make miraculous plays, step up and inside the pocket. His pocket presence is phenomenal. Like, Herbert is ridiculous. When he is on, he is unstoppable. But the thing is about him, we need more leadership. We need to uplift our team. We need to overcome. And I feel like there's far too many excuses for Justin Herbert at this point for a guy that is like lauded and praised the way that he is. Coaching rank, I am not a fan of Brandon Staley at this point. I think his defense, which is what he is, a defensive coach, has not lived up to the hype. He has gotten a ton of talent into the building, and it has not consistently lived up to the hype. He consistently allows teams to run the ball on him, and it allows them to lose far too many games that they shouldn't lose. That being said, he also has moments where he's an awesome coach, like that Miami Dolphins game last year. I thought he had one of the best game plans we saw all season. He's a weird coach, man. He has times where he makes a ridiculous fourth down decision that makes no sense. Other times, he just goes on a roll where he makes every right decision known to man. So he is a very inconsistent coach. Brandon Staley could rank anywhere from inside the top 12 this year to in the bottom 5 as a head coach this season, and I wouldn't be surprised. The offensive line, I think, is a fairly average unit on paper. Rashawn Slater coming back is going to definitely upgrade this unit, but a lot of questions you have to bring up with this unit. I think this is on paper the best Chargers offensive line we've seen in a while, but we haven't really seen it play together. So that's a big question. Offensive rank, I think they're a top 10 offense without a doubt, and they could be a top 5 offense if they stay healthy, if the offensive line gives a decent floor to the offense. Austin Eckler's a beast. They've got the receiving talent. They've got Justin Herbert. They've got an improved play calling and scheme, so like that. The roster rank, definitely a top 10 roster in football. There's enough talent here to be a really good team. Secondary rank, top 12. They've got 3 good corners. They've got one of the best safeties in football. The defensive line rank, hey man, it could be better than 17. If we get back to prime Joey Bosa, if we get good out of Khalil Mack, who is getting older, and if we get a little bit more production out of the run defense inside, I think this is a pretty good defense, right? I ranked 3 of these players inside the top 32 at their position. I ranked Morgan Fox, I ranked Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. 3 guys in their starting 4 inside a top 32 on interior defensive line or defensive end. Defense rank, I think they're right in the middle of the league because they're really good against the pass, really bad against the run, somewhere in the middle. But at their best, they're a really good defense. Like, they have moments where they can shut you down. Looking at the offense, this has the potential to be one of the best offenses in football. You have Mike Williams. You have Keenan Allen, a dynamic duo wide receiver, a big target, contested catch monster in Mike Williams. Probably the best in that area in the NFL. Keenan Allen is a chain mover. He is getting old, but the guy is still putting up numbers. And I'm not the biggest fan of him. Like, I feel like he's a little overrated at this point just because he's slow. He's like not a downfield target, but man, the guy is a crafty route runner, and he consistently moves the chains. Quentin Johnston has shown flashes in the preseason. Good reports out of camp. Freakish athlete. Can really provide a downfield target for Herbert that they haven't had. And I think that could really elevate this offense. Like I said, Slater can be an elite left tackle when he is healthy. We've only really seen it for his rookie season. Corey Linsley is an elite center in this league. The rest of the guys are a little bit, suspect, but I like what I saw out of Johnson, the 2 guards, I would say, the last season. I felt like both played pretty well. Now, there's a new right guard because obviously they had him playing tackle before. Pipkins is back at right tackle. So they're going to be a little bit new, and they're going to have to gain chemistry together. But on paper, as a starting 5, this is the best Chargers offensive line we've seen in a while. Gerald Everett is a good enough tight end. Nothing special, but gets the job done. Makes a lot of contested catches for Justin Herbert. He's a good target for Herbert because Herbert can put it right on his belly, and he just comes up with the catches. Eckler and Kelly, decent running back duo. Like what I saw out of Kelly. I think he had one 70-yard touchdown in the preseason. They need more out of their backup running backs because Eckler, I think, just plays too much overall. But man, one of the best pass catchers at the running back position in football. Looking at the defensive side of the football, there's questions, but overall, when you look at the starting unit, there is a lot of talent. Like, in terms of cornerback trios in football, they're up there. They're at least in the top 5. J.C. Jackson, I think, is going to surprise people. I think he's going to have a bounce-back year this year and live up a little bit closer to his contract. I have too much faith in what I saw from him in New England. I understand the systems are a lot different, and it was a little puzzling when the Chargers signed him because it is a lot different. Right, the Chargers tend to play a lot more zone defense and off-the-ball coverage, and J.C. Jackson was a man-press corner in New England, and that's what he did best. But regardless, I do think he'll have a bit of a bounce back. Michael Davis, super underrated player. Last 3 years or 4 years, super consistent as well. Asante Samuel Jr., I have as the nickel currently. I really am a fan of him. I think he makes a ton of big plays, really smart and instinctual player, kind of like his dad. Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa are dominant when they're healthy, but they don't stay healthy a lot. They did draft a couple players on the defensive line to provide some depth that I think will help that rotation and hopefully keep older Khalil Mack a little bit fresher. They need to rely on him less, and that would be nice if Joey Bosa were healthy. They could maybe spare Mack a little bit more. Sebastian Joseph Day is a decent run defender. He needs to do more this year. They need to get more out of their interior defensive line. Morgan Fox is a good player. I know Kyle Van Noy was really preaching about what he is able to do for this defense. And then you look at the linebacker position. Eric Kendricks was brought in to help with the run defense. I think he definitely is an improvement in that regard over Drew Tranquil, but I question his mobility and his ability to cover at this point in his career. He is kind of slow. Derwin James is special. Gilman is a big question mark. Murray has not been very good throughout his career. So there's probably 2 weak starters here. But other than that, this is a pretty solid defense. And if Brandon Staley can get his head out of his rear end when it comes to defensive run defense, I think they can figure this thing out and they can be a really good defense and surprise me even. So the Los Angeles Chargers are a tricky team to figure out because as I just went through, overall roster rankings are pretty solid. They don't have many weaknesses. They are a team that just went to the playoffs last year. They were a little bit unlucky. They should have won a playoff game. I would have loved to have seen them play the Chiefs in the divisional round, but they blew it, right? Mike Williams got hurt in the last regular season game of the year. That was another boneheaded Brandon Staley move, which officially got me off of him as a head coach and really, really let me down. And I think that's the reason they didn't win a playoff game last year. Imagine if they just would have won one playoff game last year, that would have, or not blown that Jacksonville game. It would have completely turned the tide and completely changed the way we think about the Chargers. But that did so much damage to my psyche in terms of a Charger believer. I think if they just go to the divisional round and lose to the Chiefs, I think we're thinking a lot more positively about this team. Overall, though, I just can't trust this franchise. I can't trust this team. I'm looking for this graphic. I believe that they're going to be close to a playoff team, but I have them right outside. This was the 8th team in my playoff race. I had them as my number 8, which, as you guys know, there's 7 playoff seeds. So I could see the Chargers making the playoffs, absolutely, if they can stay healthy and if their defense especially can stay healthy, because I think Herbert, no matter what, will provide a solid floor for your offense. Even if they lose a Keenan Allen for a few weeks or a Mike Williams for a few weeks or even Rashawn Slater for half a season, I think they'll still be able to have at least an average offense. But the defense is what needs to come through for me to live up to their ceiling. And I'm just not sure if they'll be able to. I don't know how much I believe in Brandon Staley. At the same time, though, this is a team that on paper you would say might have improved. Like with the addition of Kellen Moore as OC, with what they've been able to do, this might be the team that's the post-hype sleeper and they make a run. I will say about this about the Chargers. If they make the playoffs, this is a team that can be a dark horse. They can knock off 1 or 2 teams in the playoffs. I like how they match up with the Chiefs. I like how they match up with the Bengals. I like how they match up with the Bills. So this is a team that could shock the world if they actually make it. Their floor, though, we've seen it before. We've seen the kicker problems in LA. We've seen the injury problems. They just have a really tough problem with luck. They're just an unlucky franchise. And that's why I lean towards the 9-8 instead of me being a believer at 10-7 or 11-6. You guys let me know how you feel about that, man. But I'm not quite believing in the Bolts right now this season. And maybe that's a good thing for you guys. Let me know what you think. We're going to finish off the AFC West with the Denver Broncos. Sean Payton, the new head coach. Can he fix Russell Wilson? That's what this season is all about. They went all in on the future Hall of Famer Russell Wilson at quarterback, and he looked like a different human. He looked like a fat and happy man that's married to a superstar pop singer and didn't really, look like he was interested in being the old Russell Wilson, the grinder, the fighter, the leader. And man, the guy, he literally looked fat. Like I thought Russell Wilson looked like out of shape. He looked like a different human. He wasn't moving the same. His overall ability just felt like it dropped off last year, and that's concerning because Russell Wilson was always a guy, and I remember I watched him in his rookie season. The guy just has a special quality in the clutch, in the fourth quarter to make big plays, extend plays with his legs, the arm strength, the deep ball, all of that. And he has this ability to block out the noise and make plays. When Russell Wilson is motivated, when Russell Wilson is on, Russell Wilson is one of those quarterbacks in his prime where there was simply nothing you could do to stop the guy. He would make unstoppable throws, unstoppable placement of the football, ridiculous scramble plays that you're just like, I don't know how you stop that. Like, I don't know what you're supposed to do about that. And Russell Wilson is this type of guy that when he was at his best, he could go for 400. He could go for 5 tutties. Like, it was no problem, right? And he carried Seahawks teams season after season. But I believe for the Denver Broncos to be good this year, they don't have to carry Russell Wilson. They need a competent Russell Wilson, but they're not going to get special Russell Wilson. I believe that guy is gone. I believe that guy has passed. I don't think Broncos fans, unfortunately, are ever going to get that guy. And that sucks. But I will say, they're going to need a balanced team. They're going to need a good defense. They're going to need a good running game. They're going to need great coaching. And I feel like it's possible. But I still feel that this team might be a little overrated entering 2023. So let's discuss it. Let's look at their rankings across the board. I think the expectations for the Broncos are maybe a little too high. Just because you added a coach. It's maybe a little too high based on what happened last season and how bad last season was. So let's take a look at the rankings. At number 22 quarterback, I have Russell Wilson. Again, guys, I thought he was terrible last year. Like really, really bad. And I think you guys would agree. Far too many turnovers, erratic decision making, not, enough consistency. Too much inaccuracy, too much holding on to the football. Just not enough consistency from that position. Coaching, Sean Payton is a Hall of Fame coach. In my opinion, he is a top 3 coach of his era. You've got Bill Belichick, you've got Andy Reid, and right after that, it's Sean Payton to me. Then you've got the offensive line at number 10. I think this offensive line has the potential to be really awesome. They've got to be healthy, but when you look at the individual talents on the O-line and what they've been able to do to reshape it, rebuild it, they've got good coaching. I feel like they can be a top 10 offensive line. And if this team is going to be good, they need this offensive line to be a top 10 offensive line. There's no doubt about it. The offensive rank is number 20. I think what it comes down to me is the receiving core. A lot of injuries in the receiving core already. Jerry Jeudy might not be ready for the season, probably going to miss a few weeks. Tim Patrick out again, unfortunately. I was a big fan of Tim Patrick. Courtland Sutton looks like he's getting slow and old. We're talking about Marvin Mims like he's the next Demaryius Thomas. By the way, rest in peace. And KJ Hamler also injured. So, the Broncos, I just don't know if they have the skill talent to make this thing work with Russell Wilson, even though I think the offensive line is pretty good. The roster rank, I think, is right in the middle of the NFL. I think they have a pretty good defense. I think they have, on paper, a pretty good offense, but again, a lot of injuries already. Secondary rank, I think they're a top 10 unit, led by an all-pro safety, Justin Simmons, an all-pro corner, Pat Surtain. So that is a very good secondary, and they don't really have any weaknesses in the secondary either. Defensive line, I think they're fine, but they're not great. They lost Jermonte Williams, in favor of Zach Allen. They brought in Frank Clark to kind of replace the mystery or the memory, I should say, of Von Miller and Bradley Chubb. And Frank Clark will join Randy Gregory and Browning as their edge players. Not exactly great stuff. Gregory has a lot of potential. We'll talk about that. Defense rank, number 15. I think they're fairly average. Last year, they were actually pretty darn good. But I feel like new scheme are a little bit different in scheme. Vance Joseph is there. I think he'll play a little bit more aggressively. And when you look at the talent, I don't know, man. It feels like an average defense, not really like a great defense. I think they played above their level last year. So let's take a look at the offense. The offense, you've got Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, and Mims at wide receiver. I think that Jeudy is the guy when he's healthy, but he, again, already is hurt. And how's that going to affect his season this year? Will he ever get to 100%? there's questions about that. I was really big on Judy entering this season. I felt like he was about to have his best season ever, 90, 100 catches. I'm a fan of him. I'm not a big fan. I'm a fan of him. I feel like when he's healthy, he has the potential to be a number one receiver in this league. Play inside, play outside, run great routes, separate. And that's what Russell Wilson needed, but unfortunately, already injured. Sutton, to me, is the opposite. He's a jump ball guy. He's going to get vertical. He's a big body. He's not going to separate. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Devontae Parker, who's on my Patriots. Sutton probably has had a better career as of late than Devontae Parker, but both guys kind of similar to me. Get injured a lot, jump ball guys, make a lot of plays down the field, but they're very inconsistent. Marvin Mims, young player, we'll see what he is. Sean Payton obviously thought of him, very highly, taking him in the second round. Offensive line, though, again, we talked about it. It can be a top 10 unit. The only real question mark about it is the center position. But they got really good guards. I love the addition of Ben Powers. I think Garrett Bowles is an awesome player when he's in there. McGlinchey, maybe a little bit not worth the money, but hey, he's a huge improvement on what they had. Greg Dulcich has a lot of upside at tight end. I've heard conflicting reports about that in training camp, but I liked the flashes he showed last year. Javonte Williams can be a very good running back if healthy, but he's coming off serious surgery and serious injuries. Samaje Perine is just a stable veteran running back that can get the job done if Javonte's not there. So overall, the offense, I think it's fairly average. Sean Payton's going to have to do a lot of magic in order for this offense to really be very good, but can't be worse than last year. Defensively, again, I like the interior duo of DJ Jones and Zach Allen. I love the signing of Zach Allen. I think he's a player on the rise. I like that type of signing. Pat Surtain is one of the best corners in football. I ranked him at number 2. Simmons is one of the best safeties in the NFL. I ranked him at number 4. Kareem Jackson, veteran of the game. Slowing down a bit, though. You got to worry about that. Singleton and Jewell on the inside. Singleton's a tackle machine. Had a good season last year. Mathis, an ascending second-year player. Kawan Williams, very solid first year with Denver, has been a good player in San Francisco previous. Denver has a solid defense, and I would expect with Vance Joseph, who I think is one of the most underrated, by the way, most underrated play callers. I thought he did a lot with Arizona's defense the last couple of years. He got a lot out of a lot of little. I mean, like the corner position, nothing there. Safety position, pretty good, and really not a lot on the defensive line either. Like Vance Joseph did a lot, in my opinion, in Arizona for that defense. So I expect good things, even though, is it Evero, who was a really good coordinator for you guys last year? I think that Vance Joseph can be just as good, if not better. Bring a little bit more aggression to the table, a little bit more creativity. He plays a fearless style, and I like that. But I will say, I just don't know if either of the offense or defense has enough special or enough upside for me to really believe in this team. And that's kind of what I see. I see a very very average roster, very average team. And it would take a great Russell Wilson resurgence for this team to make the playoffs, in my opinion. So, my prediction for the Broncos is 7-10. I have them tying the Raiders for the last spot in the division at 7-10. Now, that is still an improvement on last year. That's a 2-win improvement, I believe, from last year. I think their floor is last year. With Sean Payton, I don't think you can do any worse than 5 wins with this football team. The ceiling, though, 10-7. Let's say Jerry Jeudy comes back. He's fine. Russ is looking pretty darn good. The offensive line plays well. Javonte is looking decent. The defense is a top 12 unit. This is a team that can win 10, 11 games if everything goes their way with Sean Payton coaching. But I just feel like it's going to land somewhere in the middle. I think there's going to be issues already. We've seen injuries. I think they're going to win 6, 7, 8, maybe 9 games, somewhere in that range. And they just won't quite be good enough, but they will be a tough beat, like a tough out. They'll be a tough team to beat. So I have going under the 8.5 win total, which I think is a bit too high. I'm going 7-10 for the Denver Broncos. And my overall division standings are the Kansas City Chiefs at 12-5, the LA Chargers in second place at 9-8 as the 8th seed, just outside the division. I have the Chiefs as the number 2 seed in the AFC. The Raiders at 7-10, the Broncos at 7-10. I think the Raiders and the Broncos both improve this year. The Chargers take a slight step back, and the Chiefs about the same, but not the number 1 seed, the number 2 seed. So There it is, guys. My AFC West breakdown, standings, thoughts, analysis. You guys let me know where I was right, where I was wrong. If you want to have any questions whatsoever, leave them in the comment section below. And guys, don't forget to leave your predictions in the comment section. Love hearing from you. I'm always up to answer any comment. And don't forget to Gronk spike that like button. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more NFL division previews just like this. We're going through every division. If you guys haven't already, make sure to check out the AFC South, the AFC East, the AFC North. That is already out on the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's Mitch. Peace.